Hi, everyone. My name is Ruben Adery. I'm a dialect coach here in LA, Los Angeles, California. And for much of my adult life, I have been deceiving people. I'm not a magician. I'm just a regular polyglot like you. But I use pronunciation in all of my languages to give off an impression that for some reason brings into question where I'm originally from. Accents tend to do that, no? We bring in features of our current languages and incorporate the phonological patterns without even thinking twice, especially if the languages share an alphabet. The reason this tends to happen is because we often see the language written a lot more initially, and we're led to make associations with the letters, but not with the phonemes that those letters represent. If you study a language with a different alphabet, or sets of characters or symbols or signs, then you're left to the transliteration system, which is often flawed because it also makes associations with letters and not necessarily with sounds themselves. So before we get into it, when learning to acquire any foreign accent, I invite you to question the relationship between letters and sounds. Know that it's not always a one-to-one relationship, especially in a language like English, and also consider that the letters that are common between any two languages may be pronounced slightly differently. And I know this from spending the last 7 years and a little bit more training, working closely with accents of all kinds, and refining my ear to be able to pick up on the subtleties in someone's voice. Things like voicing, aspiration of a consonant, connection of words, vowel length, things like intonation, and even allophones, which are slight variations in sound that are produced by the same letter, which I talked about in depth in last year's presentation, Do I Detect an Accent? These are all important variables when it comes to acquiring a foreign accent, and they make the language interesting. But you don't have to be a linguist to figure out some of these interesting differences for yourself. Today, I'm going to share some important linguistic concepts that will help you understand some unique phenomena in spoken English. And then I'll explain them using lots and lots of examples. They're the kind of patterns and pronunciations that, if you're a native speaker, will leave you saying, oh yeah, we do that. And for any non-native speakers, it will be hopefully a nice insight into how we use English descriptively. And if you're not familiar with that term, let's first unpack the all-important difference between prescriptive and descriptive pronunciation. Hopefully this is becoming more and more commonly known, especially in our community here. And it allows us to finally give another category aside from the long-lived dichotomy of formal versus informal. Prescriptive pronunciation refers to the official way of pronouncing something, a word or a phrase, often coming out over-pronounced. We typically pronounce individual words prescriptively. For example, very common English prescriptive use can be seen in the word to, T-O. If a native speaker sees the word in isolation, they would most likely pronounce it just like the number 2 and the adverb to, T-O-O. But put it in a short sentence, they went to sleep, the to changes in English to a more neutral, reduced t. They went to sleep. They went to sleep. That's how we pronounce it descriptively. See, it's already getting interesting. And to be extra clear, descriptive use shouldn't be confused with slang or rude versions of the language. It's more about the way the language seems to change when spoken at a natural rate by native speakers. You can speak descriptively in a formal, professional setting, and you can speak prescriptively in a more casual conversation. See what I mean here? Not every language has such a huge gap between the prescriptive and descriptive uses, or they call it something else, written versus spoken, textbook Spanish versus streetwise Hebrew. No matter what, you should consider the different ways that you might pronounce a word in your native language when you push words together or when you speak at a natural rate. You may find that it changes or blends or reduces in some way. But what if someone asked you to describe the most unique things about your native accent? Where do you even start? I suppose for polyglots, it might be a bit easier given the fact that we're constantly identifying new features, slight differences, exceptions, all that fun stuff. For many, the most difficult sounds come to mind, right? Sounds that are unique to your language only or that are hard for foreigners to pronounce. L'articolo li in italiano, or trailing the R's in Spanish, or if you're trying to sound Israeli, the Hebrew resh, among many tricky consonant sounds. Or you might even think of nasalized vowels, like in French or in Portuguese, weird vowel combinations, tongue twisters, which tend to even give native speakers trouble. And while those features of language are definitely unique, they're also typically very well known early on. But the features of English that we'll get into today are a little less studied, a lot more descriptive, and to be clear, are not necessarily the most difficult to pronounce, but maybe the most difficult to identify and then classify. I've even given them creative names to help you with your memory. We'll mostly be talking about T and D sandwiches and chocolate syllables. You may know these concepts by other names, but hopefully you can see certain pronunciations from a new perspective as I share with you why I think they're so fascinating. To save time today, I'm going to read all of the examples of words with my own accent instead of playing lots of clips. Maybe I'll try to imitate a couple of different native accents in English. But I also encourage you to take advantage of sites like Youglish. If you're not familiar, this site youglish.com allows you to search for a word or a short phrase, generating an entire YouTube playlist of videos that contain your word. It's spoken in random contexts and by all different types of native speakers. It starts right as the word is about to be said. It's a great tool for targeted listening. You can search in 17 different languages at this point, and it's completely free also as of today. I have no affiliation. It's just a useful resource I thought I would share. Now, before we get into the sandwiches, as a little appetizer, I've prepared a little homage to silent letters. You can see that. You can't talk about interesting features of English without bringing up silent letters. They will also be a recurring theme throughout our discussion today. Even though we won't be referring to silent letters per se, these interesting changes to come will deal with reductions and contractions, and for some people would be considered silent in a way. It's easy to say that about many things that are hard to understand in English. Oh, that's just silent. Truly silent letters are such a quintessential element of the language, the written language in particular. They give us a peek into the history of a word, showing traces of past pronunciations, and they help us distinguish the physical identity of the word. And knowing when a letter is not pronounced is kind of like knowing an insider secret, language secret. If you start with the written language, you have to be explicitly told that it's silent. But once you're in on it, once you're in on the secret, and you can retain that information, you can confidently leave it out and actually sound more clear with less effort, fewer sounds. So I've just put together a short list of 5 commonly mispronounced words with silent letters. Make sure that you're not pronouncing the capital letters in the first line here. There's no W in answer, answer. Let's call it a dropped R in surprise, surprise. Don't even think about the G or even the E in the word foreign, foreign. Those first 3 words, by the way, all have silent letters in the unstressed syllable. This is super common, and those unstressed syllables should be the first place you look for variations in pronunciation. The last 2 words won't pronounce the L in salmon, salmon, or walk. It's important to realize and to note that these letters are all prescriptively silent, meaning there is no version of English that considers that letter and its corresponding sound as part of the word. This is slightly different from a sound that could be removed optionally, depending on the preference of the speaker, I suppose. Like for the word 20, or internet, or Toronto. It usually happens with the letter T in English. I call these Toronto T's, or sometimes Atlanta T's, but they are optional. You can absolutely say 20, or internet, or Toronto, but descriptively, word of the day, we may choose to slide right over it and let the N do the linking. But there's a third type of sound, a sound that you may already be removing without realizing it, because mostly because it takes extra effort to pronounce. I'm talking about a T or a D sandwich, which is descriptively silent, just like the D in the word sandwich. For many speakers, this D between 2 consonant sounds will disappear, leaving us with sandwich, sandwich. D sandwiches almost always occur when the letter N comes right before a D. So N plus D plus any other consonant sound will often remove the active release of this D sound, where you would otherwise hear it in a 3-consonant cluster. So you don't need to say sandwich, sandwich, just sandwich. To make your own list, think of any noun or verb that already ends with ND. Ends is already an example of that. Ends, there's an example right there. So I would say one friend, but friends, 2 friends, friends. I spend, but he spends, spends. Do you hear a D? Here are some more examples. Got lots of examples of D sandwiches. Hands, sounds, brands, kinds. These are, of course, 1-syllable words, so easy to spot. Hands, sounds, brands, kinds. And then we get even 2-syllable words like depends, windshield, windmill, handsome, Lindsay, the name Lindsay, and bandwidth, bandwidth. No D in those words. We got sandwiches. And it doesn't have to be limited to just one word. The phrase hand me, send them, or send me and hand them are also very common. Also the oh so common collocation and the will all drop the D pronunciation and connect with that sound. send me, hand them, and the. And because of D sandwiches, Beauty and the Beast, Beauty and the Beast, and Beauty in the Beast, they sound really similar, if not identical. Beauty and the Beast, Beauty and the Beast. Just don't hear it. T sandwiches are a little bit more interesting, I suppose, because there are many more possible combinations that bring us to this same T-less conclusion. A clear example of a T sandwich would be the word facts. Facts, F-A-C-T-S. Do you hear the T in that cluster? Facts, 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 facts. For most, the word fax would sound exactly the same as a fax machine, F-A-X, fax. There are many more combinations of consonants that can form a T sandwich, though most will end with this S or a CH sound after this T. Let's go through a few together. The first common combination is CTS, just like we saw in the word fax. But this will also happen with any noun or verb that ends already with a CT when an S is added. Think of these words like expects, projects or projects, respects, contacts, connects, or selects. It seems that these CTS combinations can all be replaced with a simple X. Projects, expects, respects, contacts, connects, selects. I'm not suggesting any kind of spelling reform like this to the language, but it really would make the letters match the sounds. Another common grouping is FTS. FTS as in gifts, or lifts, or lofts, crafts. Maybe one of your crafts is designing software. You'll hear these combinations draw out the S. Gifts, lifts, lofts, crafts, software. Let's take a look at NTS, which gives us a few more examples. Plants, mints, giants, parents, and my favorite, accents. That'll be a fun party. Plants, mints, which is also another word. Those are homophones. Mints and mints, giants, parents, and accents. Putting a CE makes these words kind of like funny. But it also makes words like patience, right? People who see the doctor, and patience, calmness, homophones as well. Finally, the most common grouping of T sandwiches seems to be STS. STS. You'll have a hard time hearing the T in words like tests, tests, firsts, guests, exists, dentists. Even dentists can be atheists. But you see the S kind of drawing out in all these words. The most useful to you might be in the linking between two words. It's a big feature of this, specifically in words like first, last, most, and best. These four words, first, last, best, and most. These words already have 2 out of the 3 letters. So if the next word begins with a consonant sound, which is statistically high, we've hit the trifecta. And the T's almost always get replaced by more S sound. Think about common collocations. Think yourself about any words that would come after the word first. First place, first time. Those T's linking together. First grade, as we say in the United States. All of these stretch the S. First place, first. What about last? Last name. Last name, last night, last minute, last week. We almost always say last night, last week, first place. We see also best friend, best time, best moment, most people, most people, sometimes too many consonants in that cluster. Most people, most days, most can, should change that too. Guest bathroom, lost dog, fact check. We even have examples here of no S in the cluster. So fact check using the CH, and next guy, also removing that T. So I'm not claiming the T is silent. Well, at least not in the same way that the T is silent in Christmas or mortgage or ballet. It just gets overpowered by the surrounding sibilant sounds, mainly S, F, TH, and CH. We even see this happening with other consonants. There's a TH sandwich in the plural of the word month. You've seen this before. Months. 1 month, 2 months. The same goes for asthma or ask me. It gets even more, I suppose you don't hear the K, going back to that, ask me, you don't hear the K in the past tense of ask when you put another consonant after it. So ask me, asked me. Or even just with the vowel, you might say, I asked him. I asked him, I asked her a question. So I guess it's a K sandwich. But it gets even more interesting when you see some of these common words applying their sandwich tendencies, even when not surrounded by consonant sounds on both sides. Call it an open-faced D sandwich. The word and is a perfect example of this. We often pronounce the word and without the D, even when followed by a vowel sound. And I think, and I know, and another thing, and overall, or the number 2000, 2008 instead of 2008. You have it both in those two words, 1000 and the word and. Any clear release of that D sound takes away from the natural flow and connection of those words. Call it descriptive, call it optional D, like I do with the Toronto T when followed by an N. But no matter what, you should see it as an interesting evolution of the spoken language, away from the release of final consonants, in particular these consonants D and T. And speaking of interesting, wait, is it interesting or interesting? Yeah, we got to talk about chocolate syllables. Chocolate syllables are unstressed vowels that are essentially removed from a word or a phrase when pronounced descriptively. Like the second O in the word chocolate. It just melts away. Huh? The 3 syllables chocolate become 2. Chocolate. Chocolate. And this is actually way more common than you might think. Here are the main criteria. These words are typically 3 or more syllables. I mean, you got to have 3 if you're going to omit one of them. They also tend to stress the first syllable, chocolate. Other examples you see probably, different. And most interestingly, they have either an R or an L consonant sound in the middle of the word, usually right after the vowel that we're taking out. That's relevant because many consonants in English can cluster together with R and L very easily. So saying chocolate, because of the rhythm of the language, the unstressed nature of that K syllable, and the link with the next L, we get this reduction, chocolate. Here are a few more examples with L. I've grouped them actually together to help you with your memory. Hopefully you can see these well. Chocolate, of course, the first one, chocolate, and broccoli, another example. Broccoli is how we say it in the US at least. Broccoli. Family, Got an M linking with an L. Family, family. And just so you know, on the right side, I've kind of given these like Latinized phonetic transcriptions of my own. Cha, cha, is so you don't say chocolate, or chocolate, but this choa is my way of kind of finding that aw vowel. Of course, in my own accent. Broccoli, bra, the two A's supposed to be pronounced bra, just like you hear. Fea is this American English short A vowel, and I also spell this with ea to help with the concept. It's not family, but family can reduce here now even more to family. We have omelet, bachelor, bachelorette, and then these words at the bottom that all end with the same C-A-L-L-Y, clee. Basically, typically, technically, historically, magically, physically. So that clee sound at the end, removing the A, as you see. There are a ton with R as well. Here are some of the most common. Notice that notice these consonant cluster patterns on the left. Here we have V combining with R and F combining with R. Words like several, several, several. Favorite becomes favorite. Average becomes average. Every, another word that reduces. This also happens with FR in words like difference and conference. Another common grouping is PR or BR. Have a listen to some of these words. We have aspirin, aspirin, separate, prit. This is, by the way, just the adjective. The verb separate doesn't do this. So just the adjective separate, separate rooms, separate. Corporate, another one. Opera, temperature, collaborative, and laboratory. Or I suppose in British English would be laboratory, which still has an omitted sound, but fun to play with accents. Laboratory or Labrador, kind of like the dog. The next words, though very common, are just weird. Many of them don't even have an R or an L to link to, but these are words that you know. Evening, without the second E. Evening, evening. Business, extremely common. Probably, Florida, Wednesday, and Catholic. Catholic. Watch out for these uas, as I call them. The chocolate syllable here is a vowel removal as well. So words like usually reduce to usually. Actually becomes actually. And valuable becomes valuable. Don't forget the most interesting one. The word interesting also contains a chocolate syllable. Interesting. Here are a couple practice sentences to drive home the point. The first one is, my family typically feels comfortable doing business in Florida. My family typically feels comfortable doing business in Florida. And the next, actually, chocolate is probably my favorite. Actually, chocolate is probably my favorite. My aim in sharing all of this with you is to show you that there is a form to much of it. There are patterns that we see, even in the exceptions. And if your goal is to come as close as you can to sounding native, for whatever reason, focusing on descriptive use tends to give off an impression that you have experience with the people who speak natively, even if you don't. One conclusion you might draw from all this talk about removing sounds is that spoken English is lazy. What's important to consider is that as natives, we learn to speak before we learn to write. So these interesting features are mostly lingering inconsistencies in the way that English spelling connects to English sounds, especially when compared to many other languages. We can't reform the spelling system fast enough to match the ideal expectations of many learners of English. And I'm not claiming that any pronunciations are better or worse among native speakers. I actually know that most of us have been doing all of this stuff for generations. This is not a new, slangy, super, hyper, mega cool, fashionable use of language that's going out of style. It's the slow, evolving, potentially boring effect of spoken language moving away from its written form. English is a stress-timed language, which means we give less attention to unstressed syllables, And that's been evident in many examples today. It's surprisingly common among many English accents from all around the world. These chocolate syllables are an easy way to spot a foreign accent, since most non-native speakers tend to pronounce these words, these extra vowels. But on the other hand, it's also the easiest way to immediately change an accent. It is, after all, what native speakers are listening for. It's what they're expecting to hear. So just like we have regional variations in sound and formal and informal registers in English and in many languages, we also have prescriptive and descriptive differences. And your choices in conversation will represent your understanding of the two. The reality is, even in formal settings, quote, formal settings, we don't really change our pronunciation. We might slow down a little bit when presenting and use kind, respectful language to those that we respect, with our bosses and the like. But descriptive pronunciations like gonna or gotta aren't going to offend anyone. And neither is a tea sandwich or a chocolate syllable. On the contrary, it's a refreshing change or a clear way to communicate and show off how well you understand how people actually speak day to day. You're building confidence by showing the listener how you know what to remove, even. Plus, it's just a really nice feeling to know that pronouncing fewer sounds actually sounds more natural. So whether you're going for deceptively native sounding accent, or you're just interested in learning more about pronunciation in any language, pay attention to sounds and individual words, but also consider how the letters fit into a short phrase or a longer sentence. Where does it fall in the word? What sounds are surrounding it? Are there any known allophones? Now you're applying pronunciation principles like a proper polyglot. Parabéns. You can find out more about what I do with accent training at linguisticspro.com. I've also linked here the website Youglish, just to remind you, this website for improving your targeted listening. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd be happy to answer any questions. It seems like we have a couple here. So thank you guys so much for the questions. The first question is, what is your recommendation to improve our pronunciation? Kind of a big one. Is it a good idea to have lessons only focused on pronunciation with a native teacher? Or should it be somebody who studied a language in phonetics? It's a great question, and I don't necessarily think you need to have somebody who studies phonetics. It's obviously a bonus. Your goal as you're learning to improve your pronunciation is firstly to clarify what that really means. Pronunciation is often broken down into two main categories: sounds and prosody. Prosodia, which is kind of a fancy word for rhythm and stress and linking and intonation patterns. So if you understand those four linking, rhythm, intonation, and sounds, you at least can categorize first where you need to focus. If you are working with a coach or somebody that is a native speaker, you might start by just assessing where you are at the moment. So improving your pronunciation also depends on where you're starting. It depends on what your native language is compared to English, if that's the question about improving English pronunciation. But getting feedback is huge. So the 3 parts to this answer. One is understanding what an accent is and how to change pronunciation to begin with. It's not just about going to a country and hoping for the best. The second part is understanding that you need to know where you start, where you're starting from, what your native language is, and what are the differences between the sounds in your native language and in the target language, English, which variety of English. And finally, get feedback as much as you can. Constructive feedback. Someone that works with you, could be a friend, doesn't have to be a professor or a language coach or anything, but just constantly be working on that and you will be successful. Thanks so much. All right, I'll answer this question here. Do you agree that anyone can get the native speaker's accent exactly? It's a really, really common one. I think that everyone's curious to know. In short, no, not anyone. I think that let's be realistic about this. If you're phrasing the question this way, can anyone do it? No. I think that you have to have a couple things in place. But to be fair, I think that there's a myth about whether you can get really close or imitate a native accent exactly, because people think that you have to be really young to start, or you have to have a certain language background. But there is an age factor, surely. There is an ear factor. But I do think, of course I think this, but I do think that you can be taught a lot of these features, just like from today. If you didn't know that the T was silent or the letter was dropped, and someone just reminded you about that, you're immediately getting closer to a native speaker's accent without doing anything, but just by learning information. So if you can access those pieces and those bits of information that will change your accent, will maybe change the paradigm, change the way that you think of the word, it really makes a significant progress towards this more natural accent, especially if you know what that is. Some people try to get better and improve without knowing how to really define their goal. It's a great question, and not everyone can do it, but many can, and even especially the ones who don't think they can. So keep trying for it if that's your goal. I'll answer this question from Vanessa. What would you recommend to a non-native speaker to consciously drop the sandwich letters to sound more natural? Yes, that's kind of the point to bring it up to you, is that we mostly hear non-native speakers pronouncing them, which is not wrong, of course, as we mentioned. It just seems to be one of those little things that if you pick up on it and if you imitate it, the perception just changes immediately. How did you know that there was no D? How did you know that we skip over that sound? So I guess I'll qualify this by saying, if your goal is to sound closer to that of a native speaker, if you're into this whole descriptive use of language, if you're speaking more than you're writing, then absolutely. Don't remove them from the spelling or anything, but try. If you want to try it out, don't have to use it all the time or consistently. You might want to try it in one conversation, see what the reaction is. If there is any, I'm sure there won't be, but absolutely. Try to do it, give it a try, and we'll see how it sounds. This is an interesting question about different varieties of English from Joanne. In your opinion, does the standard British accent, I guess you're referring to like RP, receive pronunciation? It's hard to make a standard of that, but British accent tend to be more prescriptive than the standard American. It's relative. It's relative to its accent. So to us in the United States, everything British seems to sound prescriptive. But that's completely relative, and it's not therefore prescriptive to a British English speaker. So it's a really fun breakdown between the two, because anybody who has proper language, like for example, pronouncing T's in these optional T or these T sandwiches, saying facts doesn't make it sound more British, but saying better with that accent with an better, makes it prescriptive in English, but unnatural in British English. You would never say better, you would say better, t with that R, that non-rhotic R. So it's really different, a different accent completely, but every accent has, or potentially has, descriptive and prescriptive uses and tendencies. And this also goes with grammar. So we do share prescriptive and descriptive grammar between our accents, of course. This is like rules like ending in a preposition. That's a prescriptive rule. We're supposed to apply that, but we don't. Neither of us. Great question, though. A couple more. Oh, thank you. This question says, you have a really great speaking voice. Thank you so much. How would you recommend English speakers improve our pronunciation, our presentation speaking? Fantastic. This is kind of a side of what I do, but not directly. I think that it's really important to consider how you sound, and recording your voice is sometimes a part of that. I know that's kind of weird for many. Listening to your own voice is a bit awkward, maybe embarrassing if other people are around, but it really gives you an insight into how you sound. And since we do perceive accents and pronunciation and presentation styles very easily, we can tell who's reading, we can tell when someone's, you know, not into it, boring, dramatic. You can definitely hear those aspects in your own voice as well. Clarity, slowing down, just slow down a little bit. Rhythmic patterns are really important. As you know, in English, we stress certain words and not others. So making that really extra clear, especially if you have an audience that's not native in English, it's really important to make sure that your message is clear. And the calmness and the delivery, of course, projection is important. And those are all really important features to present really well. But practice, do it a lot, and you should be good. All right, is IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, sufficient to capture all these subtleties? Unfortunately, no. The thing about IPA is that it's a system in itself. And so then you have to learn it as a non-native speaker. It's a third-party system like Esperanto, where we're all kind of coming in from a different area. Many of the symbols, of course, represent the same kind of Latinized sounds, but in general, IPA, you'd have to kind of go deep into those small little diacritics and aspirated symbols and glottalized symbols, which would take a lot of effort from an average student to pick up on. That said, I really love the IPA. I think it's really helpful. I also have, in many cases, replaced it with my own phonetic writing. I often use someone's native language in the spelling of their native language to make connections with English. So the IPA doesn't always help. So unfortunately, I wish it were really helpful, but because there are different IPA systems, depending on the language, there are many different symbols. Even within English, we can't seem to agree on the right symbol for the right sound. Even within American English, it's hard to distinguish ah from aw, for example. So unfortunately, no, but I wish it would, and maybe it will one day. Maybe we'll think of a different system. Okay, maybe one more. All right, let's leave it. Let's end on a fun note. Which foreign accent do I personally find the sexiest? This is super fun. I think that there's maybe a tie for me between Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. Okay, from Brazil. Oh, it's so nice. And the intonation, the musicality of it, I really love that. Of course, it doesn't really help any stereotypes, but Brazilian accent. Italian accent, it's for me very cool, and it's great to imitate all the time. But do I find it sexy? Maybe. I think it's close up there. Sometimes it's really about the things that they do in English, not necessarily about the accent personal to the character or the person themselves, but how they manipulate English. So really cool to go through this stuff with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the gathering. I hope to see you at the next event. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.